This is Shabbos Daf Chav Vav, and we were talking about whether a person could put something on a kira, on an oven, that was either banked or covered or shoveled before Shabbos, or whether it was not covered before Shabbos, what exactly the oven was fueled with. So the Mishnah basically said, if it was something like stubble or straw that is going to go out in an hour or so, then you're allowed to leave it on. Go ahead, leave it on. It's going to eventually cool off and burn out, and it's going to be gone. However, if it's something that makes coals, then coals burn brightly and slowly, and they burn over time. So then the problem is a person might stoke them to heat them up. So then you have to either shovel them out or you got to cover them. So you can cover them to have the heat remain, but you have to cover them to show that you're not allowed to stoke them to increase the heat. Then the Gemara is going to ask, how close are you allowed to put it to the fire? And we're going to discuss various things regarding that and punishments and sanctions whether or not a person did the malacha on Shabbos. So Rabbi Chalbai of Rav Anan b'Shem Rahav lo yishanu elo aleha. We only taught shehiyah, leaving, only when it's on top of the kira, on top of the oven. Halasoi chaloi. But if it's within the oven, if the oven is enclosed and you put it in, and even though it's banked ashes, it's very, very hot inside. So therefore, that's an act really of cooking on Shabbos. Leaving it inside is not allowed. Ad echan. So we are exactly how close to the fire is it allowed, and this is not just a kira. This is any open fire or coals. So Ula Amar Ula says Achloisha until 3 tvachim, actually 3 tvachim above. Amar Mana Ad makom shehu oisacharetz, until a place where they typically made a groove. In those days, they all have the same oven, so they all talked about the same thing, and there was a groove, a certain height above the flames, where the food would not burn, but it would cook, and that groove is where you would slide your pot. That's the groove, and typically the groove would be 3 tvachim or more above the heat, or if it's like an igloo shape, it would be on top, and then the heat would come up to it. Obviously, if it's out of the oven and the oven on top, then even if it's less than 3 tvachim, if it's a tiny oven, so long as it's on top of the oven, and certainly if it's a very, very big oven, this is talking about how far from the coals you're going to keep it, or if it's an open fire, like a bonfire. Amar Rav Yasi, Rabbi Bon, Rav Yasi Bon. You put the pot to where the hand rules. Rules meaning shalates, meaning it's a sovereign. So we know people who are familiar with Hilchah Shabbos will know the law of Yatzel Bite, that if water is hot to a certain heat where you touch it and you retract your hand, that's Yatzel Bite. Now we're also introducing here something called Yad Sholetes, which is where the hand rules, and that is where the hand is going to be far enough from heat that it will not retract. So you're going to have it over the fire, and when you reach for the pot, your hand is not going to feel like it's getting burned. That's the distance. So sure, it's obviously close enough to the fire that whatever's inside will stay warm, but when you reach there, your hand is not going to automatically retract to feel like it's getting burned. Visaya Kaya Dama Rav Zeira B'Shem Rav Yehuda, that according to Rav Zeira, the name of Yehuda, Muto Lahafresh Makam Shayad Shalates, it is permitted to warm in a place where the hand has sovereignty, but also Lahafre Lafshir B'Makam Shayin Boy Shalates, it's forbidden to warm in a place where the hand does not. In other words, the hand is going to retract, and you can't stand your hand there because it's going to be so hot. That is not mutter to leave it over there. Rav Yusha Bar Geizra Hava Mishamesh Kumi Rav Zeira. Rav Yusha Bar Geizra was waiting upon Rav Zeira. The Chava Meyael Kumai Tavshilin Roischin. And he brought before him some hot cooked food. So Amalei Rav Zeira said to him, Hayech is Avida. How did you do this exactly? Amalei says to him, Garif. So basically, I shoveled the pot and I put the food right there on top of where the coals were, that place where the coals were. Amalei says to him, "You can't do this. Elo grave rather you have to shovel the coals with the stove. V'yehav tlosan kifin rami alehem, and you also have to put 3 kipin at a place on top of them, and 3 kipin is bundles of like sticks or straw, so they would be able to have a certain thickness. I guess they were a standard keeping, and if it's 3 of them high, and then you put it on top, so then that's far enough from the place where the heat was, where the coals were. You can't just shovel's not enough and banking is not enough. You can't put it right exactly where the heat was. Rabbi Avuhu Hayre Bevoitzra. Rabbi Avuhu ruled this in the city of Boitzra. Namale Gitra Ramach. They should fill up a shard of hot embers. Umatzin Tlosa Kifin Umir Alehem. And you put 3 kipin distance, or you put 3 kipin actually, and then you put the pot on top. That's how you keep things warm on Shabbos. Close enough, but far enough. Daniel Berei Derav Katina B'Shem Rav Asi. So now we're going to talk about what items are like coal and what items are like straw. So Shizrei Haroyos Gifes Uveitzim. So the spines of palm branches are like mark and like wood. In other words, they're like charcoal. They burn, and they will burn long, and they're like charcoal. Therefore, if the oven is fueled with them, consider it like charcoal, and you have to bake them or shovel them. Hada the Tamar Shahaya Lachin V'Yavshu. This is only when it's stated when they were fresh and then they were dried out. Avalim Hayavation Maschilan, but if they were dried out right away, Kikash, no, they're like straw and stubble. They're going to burn out within a half hour to an hour by themselves. They're not going to leave any heat after that, and don't worry about it. Gele Behema. You have the fertilizer of Behema. Is Tane Tani. This is Tane learned Yefes of Eitzim. One said it's like charcoal. The Is Tane Tane Kikash or Gaba. One said it's like straw and stubble. Mam Demar Yefes Eitzim Bidaka. The one that said it's like charcoal is when it's a young animal, like a small animal, not a young animal, small animal. Let's see, a goat, a sheep, a lamb. Uman Demar Cash Bigasa, but it's a very bigasa, like a cow, like an elephant, like an ox, those type of animals. The and apparently that's the different ways the fertilizers burn, whether they burn hot and fast or they burn slow and long, warm and long. Hagoyreif ad shigroif kultzarchai. One who shovels, how much must he shovel? What is it? So we said shovel and bank. How much? So min madatane, from which we turn to Brisa, hagoyreif tzarech lechatet biyad. One who shovels must be meticulous to search the coals. So therefore, had the amra ad shigroif kultzarchai. He has to do the entire thing. All of it has to be gone. And one who covers with ash must be covered completely. So min madatane, what did we learn? That melave aleha na'ira shel pishtan, that you bring chase of flax on top of it, you let that burn. Hadamar afilu lo yikatam kol tzarchayim, which means you don't have to bake it completely. In other words, what you can do is a little trick is you can put flax on top, let the flax burn, that will turn to ash, that will cover it. That's enough. Or if you are covering it yourself, you cover it, you do a scattering over there. It doesn't have to be exactly every little bit covered. The Yoda Amarla, and where was this said? Yom Tov is Shabbos, when a Yom Tov is running into Shabbos. So Amar Rav Shian said, Milave Aleha Naires Shel Pishtam, that you ignite the chaff over there, and you light the chaff, and that is going to then cover it with ash, and that's enough. Kitama Binavalas Mahu, if one banged the kira and it flared up again, let's say you covered it with ash, and then all of a sudden it flared up. What happens? Rab Chia Ruba Alel Besav Ahadimuter. Rab Chia the Great went to his home once and saw this, that it happened to him, and his food was cooked Friday night based on after it flared up. He permitted it. So Be'ayin Kaimei Rav Zera Rav Hishia Rav Chanina Chaver Ryan the Rabbanan, the court of Zera Hishia Rav Chanina and the colleagues of the Rabbanan, Livash the Avar, that they flared up after the fact. So Avar Rami Ami V'Aydron Rami passed by and then they dispersed. But Ein Mechsar Leha, because they wanted to review the matter before discussing it and giving a psak. Amalain Rav China Chavrois and Rabbanon. Rav China and colleague said to the colleagues of Rabbanon, Min Awada Uvda Haya Uvda. Whatever happened, happened. What's there to discuss? You have to discuss it. It happened. He made a psak, and that's it. Finished. So Amar Rab Shmuel says, "Retai l'chein tzricha lohavaba." No, we need to know for the future. What happens? What happens again in the future? Are we make it like him and allow it, or maybe it's something we should be machmir on? We have to discuss it. We have to get to an answer. Amar Ramana says, "Ana kashakumi Rav Rabbi Ba Berei Rav Papi." I asked this question over there, and in Tamar Le'eva Lafilu Loi Bisha Leha Bischila. And if you say that it was only after the fact, because even if he cooked before the fact, it was still good. So even if he cooked and it was raw food and it was on a kira and it was left there and it was banked and he hadn't touched it, you would allow him to eat it. So what that it flared up and it cooked even more, then of course you could allow him to eat it, and that's not a problem. And therefore, Avchila made a ruling, and the ruling stands. Titane, we learned in the Brisa, Hamavashel b'Shabbos, one who cooks on Shabbos, b'Shogeg yochel. And if he did it by Shogeg, then he can eat from it. Umeizu lo yochel. But if he cooked on Shabbos purposely, then he cannot eat from it. We're talking about someone who actually cooked on Shabbos. He actually took raw food and put it on a fire on Shabbos. Divrei Meir. As Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Shogeg, if happened by Shogeg yochel on Shabbos, he can eat this stuff on Shabbos. But if he did it on purpose, he can never eat for that food. Rabbi Yochanan Asandal says, Shoygeg, if he did it, but Shoygeg to Shabbos lachirim. If he cooked on Shabbos, b'Shoygeg, then others can eat it, but to Shabbos, but not him. Umezid loy v'loyachirim. No one can eat it. If he did it mezid, not him, not anyone else. So either we could say Shoygeg, he can eat it, and the mezid, he has to wait for Motzei Shabbos. Or we're saying that Shoygeg, he can't eat it on Shabbos, but he can eat it on Motzei Shabbos. And if he did a mezid, then he can't eat it, and no one can eat it. Or we're saying that Shoygeg, he can't eat it Motzei Shabbos, but others can eat it Motzei Shabbos, and mezid, no one can eat it ever. All right. Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Asadler. Shmuel had the view of like Rabbi Yochanan Asadler. Rav Kad have a Moire Bechavrusay. When Rav would rule in his group of Talmidim, have the Amik Rabbi Meir, he would rule like Rabbi Meir, that he would say that it's according to Rabbi Meir. The first view we said that Shoygeg can eat, Mezid get away for after Shabbos. Bitzibura, but if he did, but in public, have a Moire Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. But when he was ruling in shul or to the masses in the yeshiva, then he would say, no, the psak is you have to be machmer like a sandal. That if a Shoygeg, others can eat it after Shabbos, but if it's Mezid, no one can eat it ever. Rab Shimon bar Karsana, Rab Shimon Karsana says, Karabi Yishmael, Karabi Yosi, the Rav Line, the Taneus on the Brisa, Rabbi Yishmael, Berev Yosi, Amar, Misham Aviv, Kuzla's father, called Dover Shechayavin ad Zonai Kares, anything that would make one liable for Kares by doing it b'mezid, the al shgagasoi chatos, and when he does it, obviously, then what if it's Kares or by mezid, then it's Shogeg, then it's a chatos. The Asa b'Shabbos, and he did it on Shabbos, Bein Shoygeg me Mezid, and whether he did it Shoygeg or Mezid. So if it's the Uraisa that a Mezid will give you Kares and Shoygeg will give you Chatos, so and he did it on Shabbos, so Aser Bein Loy u Bein Lacherim. It's Aser if it's done b'Shoygeg or Mezid to anybody, both for him and for himself. The whole darvish ain't chayiv in alzona kares, anything that's only rabbanon or the tolda, right? And we say that it's not going to be chayiv kares if he does it on Shabbos. It's potter aval aser. V'yashgakos chatos, and he's not going to be chayiv chatos if he does it b'shogeg. V'yasu b'Shabbos, that's on Shabbos. So if it's now all of a sudden it's a tolda or it's a rabbanon, and it's not going to give you chorus. It's not going to give you a chatos, whether it was done. So if it was done shoygeg, then yechel matzah Shabbos, he can eat a matzah Shabbos, lacherim v'loy. Others could eat it, and not him. Mazid, but if he did a mazid, that again, it's not going to give him chorus, but it's potter aval aser. He did a mazid, then loy v'loy lacherim. Then still not to him, and not acherim. So we have the levels. If it's going to be a deraisa, then not him, not anyone else, not shoygeg, not mazid, makes no difference. If it's a rabbanon, and now it's potter avalaser, so then he did a malacha like that. So not him, matzah Shabbos shoygeg, and others, yes, matzah Shabbos shoygeg, no one on Shabbos, and if he did it for mazid, then not him, not others, matzah Shabbos or ever. Ba'ayin kumei Rav Yechanan, this came to Rav Yechanan, Adam, and they said, Amar Laim, Ani Ainli El Mishnah. Rabbi Yechanan says, I don't know what you're saying, all this, but I have a Mishnah. And the Mishnah is very, very simple. And that is, Hama'aser Umavashim Shabbos, someone who tithes, who gives Meiser on Shabbos. He rectifies food on Shabbos by giving Meiser. And this is called Tevel, not Demai. We know that Demai is allowed with a stipulation. We've learned that already before in Demai. We learned already more in Shabbos. We're talking about definite Tevel that he has to rectify. If he does that on Shabbos, or he cooks on Shabbos, so shoygeg yoichel, if he did it inadvertently, then he could eat it. Even though he might be chai v'chatos, he still could eat it, because he did it b'shoygeg. Umezid lo yoichel, and if he did it on purpose, he cannot eat it. It doesn't differentiate between Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos, but it seems like this is the plain rule. He could get it from it on Shabbos. He cannot get it from it if it was, whether a Shabbos, not Shabbos, if it was a mezid.